Hi, John. Thanks for joining us. How do you balance business needs with engineering autonomy while ensuring accountability?
Hey Scott, yeah, thanks for having me on. Um, that's a tough opening question right there. Um, so the way we approach this is we have to understand they're all part of the same whole. When we're taking these tech problems and these business problems, we're creating this false dichotomy because we're all there to achieve the same ends. And so the goal needs to be to understand that if we're heading for an outcome, we're heading for some kind of effect, and we can measure effects, we can see what they are. They don't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as measuring customer acquisition, for instance. And then every piece of work and everything we do and every change we do, for instance, changing the color on a form is quite a popular change with UX people, and it's less popular with engineers because now they have to go and change things again, and it's less popular with QA people because they have to go and test things again. So these small changes have a big effect. We can bring them back to how does it change the customer acquisition rate, and as soon as we do that, we put the context for the larger problems in place. And when we start to do this, we start seeing, like, people can abuse metrics, but we also start seeing people beginning to exploit this and using this as ways of getting work through. And so we don't want this dichotomy. And there's lots of approaches and methods we can use to address it, such as how we structure teams. For instance, we want independent teams with as little oversight as possible, and that's only achievable if the business has trust and if the team is accountable and responsible for what it's trying to achieve. Once we start achieving these separations, we start freeing up the different parts of the organization to work at different speeds and different paces, and the results are absolutely dramatic. When we get it wrong, we end up creating coordination problems between multiple teams, and the costs and ramifications of that are in the range of 80% of time is wasted. So that's the approach I take, is look for independence, look for clean measurements, and then give people the accountability and the responsibility they need to go out and make the changes.
What would you do if an executive dismissed engineering concerns as technical details and pushed for a business-first approach?
So again, this comes back to effect, right? Everything we do should have a measurable effect. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. I mean, it might be, we spend all the day in the meeting, we get nothing done, but it's an effect that we can measure it. And so when the business is pushing for things from a business-first perspective, you have to understand what they're trying to say to you, which is, you're coming at me with all this technical stuff that I don't understand. Why should I care? And this is where we get into the idea, like most engineers or technical folk at this point start using words like technical debt or organizational debt, and there are many other forms of debt. And what it's saying is, I don't understand why you care about this. And we're back to differing belief systems again. Yeah. And it's a mapping exercise of language. And if you haven't done the work to take what you want to get as an organization and break it down to measurable things and distribute them through, you have a very hard time, because at some point you're going to be sat there with, say, a problem in several different databases, which needs to be changed. Every time there's a change, you have to change in 5 places, and it takes time, and it's a form of debt, and you could fix it. But if you haven't related what you're doing back to the business and realize that the business doesn't care because they can still add customers and that's their primary form of growth, this is just like a little cost over here and it doesn't matter, well, they're right to be saying that, you're not making sense. And so the business needs to help. I'm saying it like this because we asked the question as a dichotomy, right? I don't think it should be this. It's up to everyone. Everyone needs to understand what matters and why it matters and what measurements matter. Because so many times I've seen people trying to save £40 over here, whilst we're wasting £10,000 over here, and that's why we don't care about the full, you have to build the picture, and you have to. It's basically showing people the money and how it flows. And there are patterns and systems like event modeling which allow you to show how information moves through systems. And it's a very techie way of saying it, but everything's a graph. If you ever catch me in the pub, I'll end up ranting about pyramids and structure of mind at some point. But you can follow it through, you can audit it, you can see what happens. And when you've mapped it out, you can, as I said, mentioned before, like current reality trees, you can look at how the information flows, you can decide how you want it to flow, then you can build a transition plan and move between them. But it does take sitting down and understanding what the goal is and breaking that down into independent measurable things, which is very, very hard.
Can you share an example of when you help shift an engineering team from being reactive to proactive in driving business outcomes?
Probably the best and least controversial, because it's a great question. One of the problems with teams that engage in trying to answer this question is that as you improve a team, you run into the rest of the business, and at some point you become the problem. Because examples of what's going wrong are most of the time business has multiple teams all trying to coordinate, and the reason why everything takes so long is that coordination happens after the work is finished, right? Which means weeks, days, months may have passed before that work gets consumed and mixed with somebody else's. The problem is the other people have been working on it, and while they've been working on it, the requirements probably changed, and because you weren't working on it, no one told you about it. And so later on, as their requirements are changing, they're actually causing bugs in you're now the creator of bugs, even though you haven't changed anything, because the specs changed, right? Then this gets integrated. Then a big expensive set of tests have to be run because we're now integrating multiple teams together. Terrible idea. And there are ways around this. Again, I'm being quite facetious, but there are situations where this is necessary, I'm sure. I haven't met one yet, but I'm sure it is necessary sometimes, and you can reorganize your teams and design around it. And so you get into these problems, right? And so a good example of when I've gone around them is where we were given a piece of work to do SEO, apparently, right? A website, a very big website, a large amount of money running through it, wanted to sort out its SEO so stuff would appear on Google. We got all the requirements of this, we understood it, and from the complications in that, we realized there were 3 or 4 other parts of the business connected to this problem. So we went off and we talked to those parts of the business, and we found out that 3 or 4 hops away, they were trying to market their products via feeds on Google Products and other places, and none of this would work if these other problems on the way weren't fixed. And so we'd been sent in at the bottom, and it was really hard for us to make progress because we're on a tiny sub-problem in the business. Anyway, by the time we follow it through, we get to the guy, can't remember his name, let's call him Kerr. We asked him about the problem, and he's like, well, there's like £100,000 of business a month being lost here because we can't do this thing. I'm like, wow, we've got a number now. So now every conversation I have after that, and the team is focused around how do we get this £100,000 a month out? And the rest of the business is completely unequipped to have this conversation. So all these hard problems we had about like delivery and like infrastructure, because it was all on bare metal, testing, how do you schedule tests and get them through? Well, my work has a price tag attached to it. Yours doesn't. Everybody understands that like the more expensive work gets through. So, that's like an example in a commercial company. There are numerous examples I can give in other places, but when it ends up coming down to something that you can measure in terms of money, it's nice and easy. You get into cost of delay and things. But when people can clearly understand the impact of the problem, they can align behind you. Whereas when it's woolly and nebulous and a maybe, a lot of the time you're right not to do anything. Yeah. It's like that car key you lost, right? Yeah. You should replace it. But like if someone nicks your car next week, you've just saved yourself 200 quid. I mean, you have to buy a new car, so that sucks. But
Good analogy.
Options.